Let's find out a little bit more about what they do and what they're working on when it comes to sudden cardiac death. Professor Jamie Vandenberg is the Foundation's Deputy Director. Good morning.
Good morning, Kaya. Good to be with you.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. Can you paint us a picture to say who sudden cardiac death affects most?
Well, sudden cardiac death can actually affect people at all ages, from the very young right through to the very old. In the younger group, like Jack, it almost invariably affects people that have an inherited or a genetic heart condition. So that's relatively rare. It's, sudden cardiac death is much more common in the older age groups. But the work we're doing at the Institute is more focused at this stage on those younger people, because it really does cause such a tragedy when a young, fit, otherwise healthy person dies from sudden cardiac death.
Yeah, and Siobhan, Jack's mum, was saying that at this stage there's really nothing that any of the tests have shown that points to anything genetic, that points to a weakness in the heart. Is that quite common, that it's very hard to work out what the cause might be?
It certainly has been the case. Over the last 10 years, we've made a lot of progress in terms of identifying the genes that tend to be abnormal in these cases, and we probably can now make that diagnosis in about 75% of cases. So there's still 25%, and Jack, unfortunately, is probably in one of that 25% that we can't. But even just identifying the genetic cause, that's only the start. A lot of the work that we're doing now is really trying to understand why it is that a defect in this gene leads to these abnormal electrical signals in the heart. Because, as you can imagine, these kids are born with this condition, but often it's not until they're 10, 15, sometimes even 20 before it actually manifests and they die suddenly. And so what we need to do is really try and work out how we can identify that much earlier to try and prevent this tragic.
Are there warning signs before, that big fatal event?
Sometimes, but often they're relatively subtle, and it's only, when someone might have a big event and luckily they're resuscitated, you might then go back and talk to them and say, if you ever had anything in the past, a fainting spell, or where you were doing exercise and you started to feel a bit dizzy or not quite right. And sometimes they will say, oh, yeah, that happened once or twice, but I just thought that was, I was a bit of a cold or something and I didn't take any notice. So there often are signs, but they're often very subtle and missed.
Yeah, that's hard as well, isn't it? Because so often when our kids say that they have they're not feeling 100%, we can sometimes be like, oh, come on, you'll be right. You'll be right. We do it to ourselves as well.
Absolutely.
What sort of work do you do in this field? Like, what are you hoping at the Victor Chang Institute to be able to achieve when it comes to sudden cardiac death?
Yeah, so the two areas that we're working on is, first of all, work in the laboratory in terms of understanding how the genes and the proteins interact with each other to regulate the normal rhythm of the heartbeat, so that we can then try and understand what's going wrong when someone has a genetic defect. And then the second thing we're doing, in terms of translating that into the clinic, we know that these disturbances are related to the electrical signalling, and we can record those electrical signals by putting cardiac ECG electrodes on the chest and recording an ECG from the heart. And what we can do now, by recording for more than just a few seconds, if we record that activity for a couple of hours or even 24 hours, we now have access to the computer algorithms and deep learning, machine learning approaches to really try and interrogate those ECG signals in much greater detail to see if we can start to tease out what is it that is subtly different about these children who have these genetic conditions versus normal people.